that's the methodology we'll have to use.
Right now, do you know any special new phenomena that may affect the reliability? Like right now we have MBTI, HCI, PTI. So any new phenomena or new effects right now?
You know, I think we're not trying to speculate what might be happening for new phenomena at this point. I think we have enough problems dealing with the existing phenomena. So we have not looked at that. I think some of my partners in this project, including Nikil Dutt at UCLA, is probably more at that level where he's looking very closely at technology trends and understanding that. But we're at this boundary between hardware and software, so we would like to take existing manufacturing processes and see how we can do better at this point. Of course, if you're collaborating with someone else, we might be able to exploit that information. So I'm afraid I don't have an answer for that because I'm not at that level of manufacturing detail. So that's a question that I don't have an answer for. Okay. Did I answer all the four questions?
I have a strong question. Since we are software people, and if we are interested in doing software research in this area, is there any public hardware platform that comes with the hardware monitor that provides variability signatures to us?
That's a very good question. So the question is, to make this kind of research work, you need to have hardware platforms that can give you sensors. As part of a variability expedition, we're building 4 or 5 experimental platforms that hopefully we'll be able to release to the public, including one of the ARM Cortex processors that has embedded processors with monitors. And we're building a FPGA prototype of another kind of platform that we call a cyber-physical system on chip. This is some work that I talked about yesterday at Tsinghua University. And that will be a prototype that we can have a design that people can use as a reference, where you can actually sample these signatures and then use that with the software. So I think in terms of physical artifacts, I don't know if we have the ability to send out chips, but certainly reference designs we have. And that can be used as a starting point. So, but it's not at the scale of 80-core processors that Intel has, because for that you'd have to work with TSMC or MediaTek or some company that actually produces the designs. So at this point, we're still looking at it more from a university research project where you have a small-scale prototype.
Thank you.
Would that be possible to use these Java critical CIC?
I would think we can engage in that discussion. We didn't do that, but definitely it's something that we should talk about with the variability expedition project. Yeah. Yes.
CIC, they can take the whole time they can
Yes.
do the
Right. Because our plan is to release all of these in the public domain as an MSF project. So if we have these reference designs, then it's possible that we can transfer it over. So I can put you in touch with our hardware people who are actually building that. But aside from the physical prototype itself, it's still possible that for a large number of researchers, you don't need the hardware platform. You can still use simulation artifacts, where you can build a simulation prototype, build a simulation model of the sensors and the signatures, and do this kind of stuff. So I think these things can work in parallel, where you can build fairly good, faithful representations of the physical artifact in a simulation mode, and then evaluate them. So I think that's a good place, especially for students to start, because the overhead of using a real platform can be quite challenging.
In the table, you talk about approximate computing, and I think for approximate computing, it's relatively easy to use to take the advantages of the variability, but there are a lot of computing that has to be exactly right. So for this exact computing, is it still possible to take advantages of the variability?
It's a very good question. So I think, and this is a very actually important and deep question that Trent asked, which is this approach that I showed where we can take this variability and expose it to the software stack is actually very interesting if you can afford to tolerate errors. So recall that what we're doing here is we have this picture here, and we're trying to expose this picture. You're trying to expose these this variation that was hidden in guard banding now is being exposed to the software. So these errors that are happening here, if you can tolerate them, great, then you can do it. If you cannot tolerate them, then what you'd have to do is have software mechanisms that can actually be fault tolerant. So you can actually do, for example, code versions, or you can do recompiling, just-in-time compiling, and so on. So that rather than looking at it from an approximate computing point of view where you can ignore the error, in those cases the software has to actually take action, proactive action for that error. So what that means is you can still do it, it's more work, but in fact that's also work that we've been looking at, which is for exact applications you still have to have software mechanisms that can do fault recovery and so forth. So there the cost is going to be very high. Going back to the cost of over-design here, in those cases actually the software has to work much harder. And you might question whether it's really useful in those cases because then the cost is actually very high. So maybe guard banding is a better option there. And the jury is out on that. I don't know if the guard banding is better or if not. But certainly for the class of approximate computing applications, this is actually very promising. So when we started the project, we weren't sure, but as we go through towards the end of the project, we're finding that most of the opportunity is indeed for these approximate computing applications. But we can still do well for exact operations. So I showed you the example of VIP zone when we did DRAM binning. That was not looking at whether the application is approximate or exact. It was completely agnostic to the application semantics. It was just taking advantage of the fact that the hardware had variability and you can do mapping. So I think there's still an opportunity for us, regardless of whether it's approximate or exact, to exploit some amount of hardware.